Some of you probably have learned this before, right? David Melech Yisrael, Chai Chai Vikayam. If you've done this before, join in. David Melech Yisrael, Chai Chai Vikayam. 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 Tell me some of you did that growing up. Sandy. Okay. Yes, you're still doing it while you grow up. Thank you, River. Oh, was that Miles? It was both of them. So it's fun, right? What are we singing? What are we singing? David Melech, David, king of Israel, David Melech Israel, Chai Chai Vikayam. May he live and rise. And why are we singing about David?
Ooh, I know.
Why, Cantor Heel?
Mashiach.
Okay, so there is the tradition in Judaism that it is from the line of King David that the Messiah will come. Okay? There's also a beautiful song, the Leonard Cohen, Hallelujah. You all, how many of you have liked that? You at the end of, I think it's at the end of Shrek. Is it played at the end of Shrek? It's at the end of Shrek.
Jeff Buckley version. Jeff Buckley version.
It's a Jeff.
It's not as biblical, that version.
Not as biblical. So I wanted you to be thinking of that. That's fun, right?
Yes.
That you're using hand motions. It's peppy. It's lively. It's David Melech Yisrael Chai Chai Vikayam. It's so much fun to sing. And yet, as I offer those words, think for just a moment. And again, Leonard, go read the lyrics of that hallelujah. It's beautiful. It's so romantic. It's so sweet. Cantor's saying it's not. The sound of it might be, but if you go listen to the words,
Maybe Jeff Buckley made it a little more romantic than the original version.
King David is quite, I'll say, an interesting character. King David is actually quite a flawed human being. And it is remarkable that here I am, 3,000 years later, we're singing songs, we're connecting with his words. He left an impression, he made an impact on this world. Now I stand before you tonight, and I am talking about King David, and I'm wondering if you've realized why I'm talking about King David. Because this week, yesterday, we all started to watch the news as everybody from the royal family of Great Britain ran up to Scotland, and Queen Elizabeth II, after 70 years of reign, died yesterday. I was talking to my father, and he's like, I remember when I was 7 or 8, when she became queen. You look back, and I know I have seen the crown, and there's another. I'm blanking on the other one. There was another documentary movies that have been talking about the monarchy in England as of the Queen's Speech was the other one that was mentioned recently. King's Speech. Oh wait, there's been a king in England? I'm kidding. Although, think about it, there are kids in England. Like again, my father remembers 7 or 8 when she was crowned as the queen. How many generations have grown up in England and never known a king of England? This is pretty extraordinary. I talk about this, and I will freely admit it's interesting because there's a generational response that you find of different people's different responses. My father's was, of course, he remembers when she was crowned. My children have been asking me more pointed questions. Why not talking about Mikhail Gorbachev, who also passed away? There was mention of Fidel Castro as well, and various other figures. Why not If I'm going to talk about Queen Elizabeth II, why don't I mention other people that were in power for long periods of time in all of their moments of humanity, for better and for worse? It's a really kind of incredible challenge. It's a really incredible question. And as I stand before you, I kept thinking about Queen Elizabeth II and her reign, and I kept coming back to King David. Because there is something when I read her obituary, when I read the stories, that just kept coming back to the humanity and the challenges of that life. I have to wonder how many of you are familiar with all of these incredible details in David's life, of his relationship with Jonathan, of his whole episode with David and Abigail and Michal, and of course is referenced in the Leonard Cohen song of his relationship with Bathsheba. Those were not exactly wholesome stories, folks. David was pretty awful in a lot of them. You start getting into the stories of Amnon and Absalom, his son that got mad because his other son attacked David's daughter and didn't respond, and he chased him out of Jerusalem, and he had to slay his own son. I remember when Cantor Rubinstein was here, and her father was giving her her blessing as she was about to depart, and he referenced David's speech to King Solomon. Do any of you remember what that consisted of? It's quite an incredible speech. As David tells Solomon, he was good to me, be nice to him. He irritated me. Make sure he dies, and his whole family too. It's quite an extraordinary send-off and blessing that David gives to Solomon. But it's David, Melech. He conquers Jerusalem, but then his hands are so much blood that he can't build the temple. It's David. He's the writer of the Psalms. He has lost so much. We see him at great heights, and we see him at incredible lows. There is an absolutely amazing book by Joseph Heller called Catch-22. Not Catch-22. That's the other book by Joseph Heller. Right? I'm actually referencing God Knows. How many of you have read God Knows? Okay? If you have read God Knows, it is quite a book. It is R-rated. It is not for our younger members here in our congregation. God Knows is Joseph Heller writing King David's autobiography. It is absolutely, and it is absolutely fascinating. It is absolutely incredible. It is David at the end of his life, so cold as he is dealing with all of his physical and mental struggles that he has to have another person lie with him in order to warm him. And you see, as he looks back, and it is not historically accurate, it's not even biblically accurate. Joseph Heller played with that character so much, it's amazing. And yet he also captures that humanity of David. As he's looking back and he's saying, wait, what have I done? As he's challenging God, God, why did you do this to me? Hence, God knows. God knows why I'm in this predicament. God knows why God did this to me. God knows why my life is turning out like this. David is extraordinary. The words of Psalm 23, as much upheaval there is in David's life, the death, the loss, the violence, the war, what do we read? So often when we are sad and afraid and not sure what to go, we read Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through this valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The last words of Psalms. Kol hanshama hallelujah, hallelujah. Even as I read those last words of Joseph Heller in God Knows, as he's saying David is just shrinking and disappearing and losing an end of his life, what is the last words of the book of Psalms? Kol hanshama hallelujah, hallelujah. Let every breath be an act of praise. 3,000 years later, and we still feel the reign of David. I saw something extraordinary in pulling out some of the pieces of this. I saw that they think there are historians that say that David wasn't much more than a tribal leader, that Jerusalem wasn't much more than an encampment. It was a tiny little place. So how does that mean that we end up with the stories we did? Because he made that impression on his children and grandchildren and door by door until here we are, hoping for the incredible world of Shalom, talking about the Messiah, where everything works together, and whose memory do we want to connect it to? King David's. I was teaching over at First Baptist Church a few weeks ago, and someone's comment was that they were really impressed with Judaism because it was so honest. That even the greatest of our kings, even one of the greatest of our heroes, made quite a lot of a mess of his life, struggled and challenged, and yet did extraordinary and amazing things. In thinking about David, as I been reflecting and thinking, what does it mean? My children asked me why Queen Elizabeth II, she did not have a whole lot of connection to Jewish life. Where is the Jewish value in honoring and remembering? And yet I kept coming back to David. I kept thinking about who he was and how he moved through the world, both his moments of perfection, those moments where he served, the moments where he lifted up, and those moments of brokenness where he as a human being was challenged. And here we are thousands of years later reflecting on his challenge. Here we're in this month of Elul. And what do we do? As I tell you the stories of David, it's not in order to say what an awful person David is. What do we do in Jewish life? We say, how do I learn from his successes and his failures? From those moments where he found those sparks of holiness and those moments where he broke the vessels further. That's what Judaism does as we look back at an incredible life. And that is why I think it is worth stopping and honoring. What in Hebrew, what is the word for honor is kavod. What does honor mean? What is kavod? The root has to do with weight, that you feel the weight of someone's presence. And it just felt like yesterday when that news came through. I am not a British citizen. I've never even, as much as I love a English Premier League football team, I've never been to London. I've had a cup of tea, but that doesn't qualify me so much, now does it?
Only somewhat.
Oh, only somewhat, thank you. And yet, yesterday when that news came, I felt the kavod of that moment. 70 years she reigned. Some of it was awful and terrible, and we look back and we cringe, and some of it was phenomenal and incredible, and she changed the world. It is worth weighing all of that and reflecting on all of that and honoring all of that. This was a significant life that left an impression on the world, and it is my hope that as Great Britain is honoring and remembering her, that just like the children and and grandchildren and way, 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 way great-grandchildren of David honor and remember and feel and talk about and wrestle, that her children and grandchildren will feel that legacy, feel that impression, and take her memory. What do we say? May someone's memory be for a blessing. And it just doesn't just mean let us look back and remember all of the good stuff. It means let us take someone's memory, how they touched us and moved us, and turn it into blessings. Sometimes because of the way someone moved through the world, but even as I share those words, sometimes it's in spite of how they move through the world that they hope for a better world. And I feel in those last few years that that's part of what Queen Elizabeth has been saying with her children and grandchildren. She's dealing with a lot of upheaval in her family, hoping for a better future for her children and grandchildren and all of those that she tried to serve. The world changed forever. We stood at a divide. One moment, the breath of this human being lingered in the air, and the next absent stretched before us like an ocean with no end, and we were left with memory and time. Time surrounds us wearing the face of the past and wearing the face of tomorrow. Grief and mourning form a path that lead us on. Time does not heal. We heal ourselves as we allow ourselves to grieve, as we allow ourselves to remember. We heal each other as we allow each to mourn in their own way. We heal as we come to know how this human being, nurtured and challenged, provoked and soothed. We heal as we learn to feel the unique rhythms in ourselves that were it not for this one life, we would never know. We are here in remembrance, and the laughter of memory mixes with tears of loss, and we recognize how quickly time passes us by without waiting for our struggle with successes or our dreams. Let this moment awaken within us a urgency, a respect for the unceasing motion of time. Let us know that every moment is precious as we feel the warmth of compassion and the strength of connection. May the memory of Queen Elizabeth II bless our actions and our thoughts. May the grace of her years reach out to touch us and give us strength. And may her light burn brightly within our hearts, our souls, and our minds as we say, Amen.
Amen.
As I share those words and challenge all of us as we move through this world, and as I say that, and if you remember last week, as I was talking, I was talking about my connection and boundaries with Jackson, Mississippi. While I do that for Queen Elizabeth II, there are lots of others for Mikhail Gorbachev and around the world. And it's my hope that you take those words of Torah and find ways of applying to lots of lives, of lots of people that move through our world.